So Stitches then, let's get into the story of this one straight out of the gate. And it's basically about a lazy, bad-tempered clown by the name of Richard Grindle. I believe his actual clowning name though is Stitches, hence the title. And this Richard Grindle is making an appearance at a birthday party for a rich 10-year-old and his precocious, bratty friends. And they are unimpressed, unfortunately, for Stitches by his antics at the party, and they start tormenting and heckling him, which culminates in a deadly accident when the kids unwittingly cause Richard to fall face first onto an upturned knife, resulting in his death. The birthday boy, Tommy, is kind of a more sensitive type than the rest of the kids, and as he was the one that was directly responsible for the incident, even though it wasn't really him that was doing the majority of the heckling and the tormenting prior to that, he was the one that kind of did the final thing that made the accident happen. As a result of this, he begins to become a bit troubled and has difficulty sleeping. And one night, shortly after he witnesses, after not being able to sleep, he goes up to his treehouse, which is in the garden, and from here he witnesses a weird procession at the grave site of the clown that died recently. As you can see the graveyard from his house, and he notices these kind of like clowns all congregating around the graveside and doing some kind of weird ceremony. It's kind of like a voodoo ceremony of sorts. We then jump forward in time 6 years and we find that Tommy is now an anxiety-ridden kind of kid that's on medication, and he's still troubled by the incident of Richard's death 6 years previously. And we also learn that it's his birthday coming up and his mother is leaving on business for a short while, thus leaving Tommy at home alone for the weekend or for a few days. I'm not sure how long it was, but certainly for at least a couple of days. And while this happens, his friends decide to throw him a birthday party at his isolated house. And although somewhat reluctant at the start to actually go ahead with this, Tommy is eventually persuaded by his friends, especially when he learns that his old friend Kate, who he's kind of had a crush on for many years, will be attending the party. Kate, incidentally, was one of the kids that was involved in the prank that got the clown killed 6 years previously. Indeed, all the kids that were involved in the prank, or the not the prank as such, but the accident, I should say, of 6 years ago, all attend the party. And of course, this provides an ideal opportunity for the return from the grave of Richard Grindle, who gatecrashes the party and then starts taking revenge on the 7 individuals who have contributed to his untimely demise 6 years before. So that's your story. We'll go now into the good points, and one thing that I will say straight away is that it's quite noticeably different from most other slashers in the sense of like the visual style. They managed to create a kind of a unique identity of its own, kind of got a real flair to it visually. It's a kind of like a tongue-in-cheek approach, which is more geared towards comedy, I'd say, than horror or slasher. And ordinarily, I'm not really a big fan of comedy. I don't really care for it, but for the most part, it did work here pretty well. It does kind of have a few bad elements to it as well, which we'll get into shortly in the video, but for the most part, it does work, and it, like I say, creates a unique feel to the film, which is kind of making it, which kind of contributes to giving it its own identity, and it's certainly very visually different in terms of the gore effects as well. It's also pretty funny at times, in particular the Richard Grindle character of the clown Stitches is particularly funny. He's got some really good lines. He's very much a killer in the mould of Freddy Krueger, not just because he's undead and kind of like supernatural, returning from the grave, but also just in the fact that he's got so many witty one-liners, many of which are quite good. So if you like Freddy Krueger, there's a good chance that you'll like Richard Stitches Grindle here. But some of the other characters too, moving on to the next good point, are also quite entertaining and quite funny at times. I liked the characters of Vinny and Sarah. They were pretty good. On the whole, the film does a really good job with the characters. They are quite stereotypical, like this, the emo goth, the bully, the kind of fat boy, etc. So they are kind of all stereotypes, but they're well acted for the most part. And one good thing as well is that they all look like the kind of age they're supposed to be. You know, in slashers we're so used to seeing like teenagers being played by people that are maybe in their late 20s or whatever, and they look much older than what they're supposed to be. But here the kids actually look like kids, so that's a major plus point there. Also, this is the last good point that I'm going to toss out there, and it's a neat concept with the clowns all having an egg in the film, and of course it's Richard's egg that is kind of destroyed at the end, that leads to him being killed, if you can kill someone that's undead. And of course it's the idea of the eggs that also enable the filmmaker to set up a kind of like a possible sequel. So I like what they did there. I mean, it's probably just a thing they made up for the film. I very much doubt that clowns really get an egg that Obviously they don't get an egg, and then if the egg gets destroyed, they die. But I'm sure they don't even get presented with an egg when they first become clowns. It's all probably just made up for the film. But whatever, I thought it was a nice touch. So I did like that aspect of things. Moving on now to the bad points, and although I did mention this kind of as a positive earlier on, as it is geared towards getting laughs or whatever you want to say, and he's kind of tongue-in-cheek, that means that it is kind of not really very scary. I mean, they obviously weren't going for it to be scary, they were going for more of a comedy, but if you just happen to see the cover art and maybe you thought that it was going to be like a really creepy clown slasher film, you might be a bit disappointed. Okay, so that's not really a big problem there, because they weren't going for it to be scary, but I just thought I'd mention that. I think sometimes as well it did go slightly too far in terms of being over the top, and it wasn't quite as realistic as I would like it to be. I think it would have been better with a tad more realism for the deaths in particular, because they did happen to be a bit cartoon-like and just up to over the top for my liking at times. I know that's all part of the charm, and like I mentioned before, but I think it would have been better just to be a tad more serious with the deaths at least, if nothing else. There's also a few other silly little things in there here and there, like for example, the hairstyle of the headmaster was a bit stupid. And there's one point when the fat boy did like, I believe he did the splits in the gym class, and that was a bit stupid, a bit unrealistic. So there's a few little things like that I didn't like, that were obviously in the fabric of the comedy of it, but I just thought they were went a bit too far. There's a few occasions when it's not, well, probably two that I can specifically think of, when it's not 100% clear whether we're just seeing something that's really happening, or whether it's something that's just going on in the imagination of the main character, Tommy. Most notably at the start, shortly after the accident, where the clown gets, where he kind of trips over and impales his face on the upturned knife. And then shortly after that, he kind of stands up, and I wasn't completely sure whether that was supposed to be just what Tommy was seeing in his imagination, or whether that actually really happened. I mean, it wouldn't make sense for it to really happen, because he would have been dead straight away, outright, just from the knife through his face, so he wouldn't be able to stand up and do what he did. But so I'm guessing it's supposed to be in Tommy's overactive mind, but it was a little bit unclear there as to whether that was real or not. There was also to a lesser extent, there was something similar in a classroom where the clown started messing about in there, and that was definitely in Tommy's mind, but it was a little bit unclear as to whether that was real or not, and that was slightly confusing, ever so slightly confusing, but only very, very minor thing there. I'm just nitpicking with that, really. There was a weird cut towards the end, though, that was a bit bizarre, where Tommy is inside a crypt-type building in the churchyard, and with Kate waiting outside, and he's punched by Richard, and then suddenly he seems to end up outside on the ground of outside the crypt somehow, and with Kate by his side, and it's not really explained how he gets there. I thought that was a bit weird. And also, during the party scene earlier on in the film, there was this is not really a bad point, but more of a missed opportunity. Perhaps they missed a trick here. But there's a scene when Tommy mistakenly eats a cookie full of drugs and gets really stoned. I was expecting that to kind of lead up to him, maybe as like a setup for him to perhaps spot Richard before the killings began, but then no one would believe him because they thought he was just stoned and he was just seeing things that weren't there. But they didn't really follow up with that really very much. So they didn't really have him having any like drug-induced hallucinations or anything like that. So I was a bit surprised they didn't really follow through with that. And like I said, it would have been a good opportunity for him to have spotted the claim, and then maybe started panicking, but no one believed him because I thought he was just, hallucinating or what have you. But that's only a small thing. It's not even a negative, really, just a missed opportunity, like I said. But they didn't really get enough mileage out of that as they could have done. I think that's pretty much it, really, for the bad points. So we'll go on to the verdict then. And overall, I thought it was a very enjoyable film. I wasn't expecting too much from it, as like I said before, I don't really like comedy, and as far as I know, this didn't have an awful lot of fanfare surrounding it, so I hadn't really read much about it prior to picking it up. Just like an impulse buy in a shop when I saw it kind of cheap. And I wasn't expecting that much, but I did really like it. I really enjoyed it. It would have been better if it was a tad more realistic at times for me personally, at least for the kills, which were a bit cartoonish and over the top and silly for my liking. But what I will say about the kills, not sure if I mentioned this earlier, but they are very gory and they don't cut away. So you've got to give them credit there. They do actually show you what's happening properly. No, this cutting away nonsense that we sometimes see. So they've certainly used their gore effects to done a really good job there. But like I say, just a little bit cartoon-like for my liking. But overall, they're very, very good. I can't give it top marks, but I can give it strong marks. So yeah, a very worthwhile addition to the collection, and we'll just give it the star rating now to bring in the stars at the end as we normally do. There's 1 star, I'm going to give it 2 stars, we're going to give it 3 stars, and we're going to give it 4 stars. So there we go, just misses that on the top marks. 4 stars out of 5 there, not very good. There you go, whatever, you can see them. 4 out of 5. Okay, thanks for watching, bye.